Good afternoon and welcome to the first of many live broadcasts. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Greg Wyatt. I'm a recruiter. I'm a bit obsessed with words in general and recruitment and how they land and how they don't land, and also the things that we don't realise that we say that gets perceived in different ways, which is kind of what we're talking about today. So bit of an experiment to start with. I don't expect to get too much engagement on this post, but this will be here for posterity as a recording. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by Jake Annan, who is famous in his own right. You'll have seen him on a number of viral videos highlighting his recruitment expertise and his shorts from time to time. I don't know what you're wearing at the moment, but perhaps you'd be interested with Jake, and then we can talk about what we're going to cover today.
I am in fact wearing shorts, but it's a hot day, so I don't think you can really judge anyone for that today. I've been a recruiter for 15 years, and same as Greg, I'm very much into the words and the written word and everything that goes with it in recruitment. You might be able to see I read quite a lot, and I've always had an interest in that side of things. So for me, the way written words are used in recruitment, specifically in adverts, but in all sorts of areas, are a big area of interest.
I think until recently, I was never really into social media very much, and I think it's pretty toxic for the most part. So LinkedIn's the only social media I'm on. But between probably 2020, when the pandemic kicked off, and a couple of years ago, I found it such a good way to gravitate towards people who had similar ideas and sort of similar life. And not necessarily because I was looking for them, but it's kind of like osmosis, isn't it? You see someone write a post and you put a comment on it and sort of gradually get to know each other. So since that time, I've developed quite a few online friendships with people I've never met. And I think that's kind of how we got to know each other as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's changed in the last year, last 6 months in particular, given how many people are using AI to generate posts and to generate comments. And there's quite a few people whose relationships I value in real life who are writing AI content, and I try and support it. But it does leave you a bit of funny taste in your mouth, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's so prevalent now. Like there was always talk of the dead internet theory many years ago, the theory that, everything online is just written by some sort of AI or robot or something, and none of it's really real. And LinkedIn is starting to feel that way, when half the posts are AI and half the comments on them are AI, and I just think, what's the point? Who's actually seeing this? Who's actually engaging with this? What is anyone really getting out of this?
I think early adopters it probably works, but the more people do it, the more it scales, the less meaning it's got, and so that's partly the sort of catalyst for Dad's debate. Really, I think I've somewhat melodramatically stated a few times that I think the ultimate end game for AI is the death of meaning, because the more we rely on technology to do stuff for us, the less intention we've got, the less things that we actually do for ourselves. And I see that a lot in AI content, because what's the point in engaging in it if you're not actually starting a proper conversation or starting a proper relationship?
I think for me, the bigger tragedy is the loss of creativity and our own brain power from the use of AI. Because if you start to get lazy and you start to use AI for everything, you don't hone that edge anymore, do you? You don't hone that edge of creativity, of ideas, of coming up with new things, and you just fall to the wayside because of it. You sort of, it's almost like, let's commit to mediocrity through AI. Well, laziness, exactly. Mediocrity, but then you never get the opportunity to improve from there.
Well, it's by nature mediocrity as well, because if you look at how AI works, it probabilistically determines what it thinks you want by looking at the aggregate of its training material. So for things like job descriptions, give me a job description for an HR manager, or write me an advert for a marketing manager that stands out from the crowd. All it will do is it will aggregate what's available and spit out something that looks nice, might be slightly better written grammatically, but doesn't have any meaning necessarily for people that you want to attract. I think if you look at recruitment, there's a big argument that adverts only attract active candidates, so people who are already looking for a job. And then the real elite recruiters, the headhunters, will access the passive market, which is 80% of the market. And there is a degree of truth in that, in terms of how you access people. They'll receive those messages differently. But I've always found that if you put effort into writing a decent job advert, or you've got a decent job description that accurately conveys what the job is against the current context of the vacancy, that starts good conversations with people. and a lot of people I speak to who have applied for jobs, maybe they'll just say this to me anyway. I'm not looking for a job, Greg, but my wife printed off this advert, and I thought I'd have a chat with you about it.
Print it off.
Now, I'm not a brilliant writer by any measure. So my dad and my sister are brilliant writers. So later this year, we're my mum mainly publishing a posthumous collection of my dad's poetry. And so I've been sort of reading through that over the last few months, and it's really painful. It's really emotional because it is literally his soul laid bare on paper. But that kind of writing is very different to my kind of writing. So I think I'm an effective writer. I'm a thinker, and I'm good at getting my thoughts out on the page. And actually, when you look at a job advert, for me, it's the consequence of the process. It's not necessarily creative in terms of imagination. It's creative in terms of iteration. So when I write a job advert, and you've laughed at me for my process, I'm sure, in the past, it starts with that deep consultation with the employer and really understanding what they're looking for, and pushing back and saying, well, actually, why have you put it back in this way? Oh, it's because you copied your job description from 3 years ago. So does that actually relate to what you're doing? Oh, it doesn't. Okay. And just pushing back gently in a constructive way to help realistically understand what it is they're trying to achieve from the vacancy, how that's described in the job description. And from there, that creates your messaging, because if you understand who you should be appealing to and why, those are the words you use. So why would they be interested in this job? Well, that has to be in a job advert. And that fundamentally is a different approach to I'd say 95% of job adverts out there. I mean, I don't know, you're probably as geeky as I am in that respect, but I mean, I've always found that
absolutely
early in my career, even when I didn't really understand what good writing is from the perspective of starting conversations, I always took care of my adverts. And when I'd be in competition with other agencies, like much bigger agencies, part of me wouldn't understand why I'd fill more jobs through those adverts than they would. But it's because of the words you use.
Yeah, 100%. I felt it early on in my career, because I started my agency career in a massive agency in, perhaps the biggest in the country. And some of my early internal career was in, some massive corporate public sector beasts. And in both of them, I always felt the almost the weight of a certain type of advert that had to be written. They were very clear on that this is what you're allowed to do, this is what you're allowed to include, this is the structure, and some of them had ATSs where you have to have this structure in this order, and this paragraph here, and this paragraph here, and this paragraph here. Who are we? What do we do? All that sort of stuff. And very early on, I realised that this just isn't. It's not what we need. It's just it never felt right. And I remember one of my first jobs, my first in-house jobs, where the advert writing process was, well, you write "we are recruiting for," put the job title in, and then you just copy paste the job description into it. I remember thinking, how is this?
People would never guess that you were recruiting for that job title, would they? So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, both.
Delighted to do it. I mean, that's even better.
That's a crime in itself. But yeah, I think job descriptions are one of those things that needs to be as far away from job advertising as possible. You talk about getting into a really good brief and pushing back on the job description. I've always done my best to avoid a job description. I don't want to read a job description before I have a conversation with somebody. I want to understand the essence of what that role is. What's the actual purpose? What are we trying to achieve? What's that person's core purpose? What's that person's core role and purpose and objectives before I even think about a job description? And if that conversation's gone well, then realistically, I should never need to look at that job description at all.
Well, for me, it's like picking up a pizza at Marks and Spencer's. So you've got that lovely packaging in there. Oh, this isn't just normal pizza; it's Belgian pizza with a slice of spice or whatever. And you pick it up because of the anticipation of how it's going to taste later. But when you look at the back at the ingredients, in case you're allergic to something on it, or my mum doesn't like garlic, so if I was going to buy pizza, I'd always check to make sure there's no garlic in it. And that, for me, is the difference between a job description and an advert. The advert starts the engagement, whereas the job description confirms that it's right for both parties, or at least it should do, as long as you're not going on to ChatGPT and saying, write me an advert for an HR manager. I mean, maybe what we can show is the brilliant content AI of LinkedIn when you start an advert through their portal, which produces gibberish. It's embarrassingly bad.
I've never clicked it. It's one of those things that I've seen and just gone, what's the point? I don't even want to begin that path.
Why don't we do that now? Actually, if I share my screen, it's probably go embarrassingly wrong, but we've only got probably 0 viewers, so it doesn't. That's slow stakes, isn't it? If I go on to this page, so you can. This is our dashboard. That doesn't say very much. So anyone can do this actually. So if you go into business on your account, but I'm going to post a job for free. I can't do that because I'm a recruiter, but I can start doing that. And this is getting more integrated with LinkedIn's AI hiring assistant as well. So that was the last job that I recruited on here. What kind of job should we look for? Should we see if there's a copywriter? Yeah, that could be funny if I can spell it. What kind of copywriter? Marketing, web copywriter, marketing copywriter.
Just the word copyright, does it? Or what are you looking at? Because I can just see your.
You can't see it, can you?
I see. It's given me the last window that you were on, not the current window that you're on.
Okay, so if I go, oh, you're right. Okay, I see what's happened. It's because it's opened a new tab, isn't it? So if I go on to,
you're sharing the last tab.
Should be this one then. Here we are. So
there we go.
This is how it starts up. So you probably didn't see it earlier. So you go into business, and then you can post a job for free along there, and then type in your desired job title. So if we just go for copywriter, and then what it does, the first page is helps you craft it. Isn't that exciting? So this is the classic boilerplate approach, isn't it? Birch and White recruitment sports. I probably need to update that. I don't know where that's hidden. Who cares? Who cares what Birch and White recruitment is? I think if you cared about me as a recruiter, you probably care more about Greg. If I was that lucky. Full-time hybrid. So what's happened there is it's picked up on the previous vacancy.
It's like to hallucinate and make things up, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this actually something like this happened to me last time I advertised, which caused a bit of a problem. So I advertised a role where I put Royston as the location, and then it populated Royston as the next advert, even though it was somewhere else, and I didn't have an opportunity to change it. So it created all sorts of issues. So it's an unintentional word problem right there. So this is what it thinks a good advert is, and it's not an advert, is it? It reiterates what you know already, because that's what I've set up as the job title and where it is. It says what a copywriter might do. That's not a copywriter, is it? That's more of a content writer.
Yeah, it's not very good. I mean, admittedly, it's not been given very much information, but it shouldn't be able to produce anything with that, really.
No, if you go on to ChatGPT and you do the same thing, which is
I like that the first qualification is strong writing skills, as though that somebody might apply for a copywriter job.
Strong writing skills.
Right.
Write me an incredible advert for a copywriter.
You know what? The fact that you've used the word incredible means it might actually work.
But yeah, definitely, because that's all the difference. Words that move people, ideas that drive action. Well, that is, to be fair, what a copywriter does.
That's a nicer, it's a nicer ad than the LinkedIn one.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? That a free resource does something better than something that you're probably paying for. But actually, this is kind of a problem with AI, because although that's a nice sentence, that's what copywriters do already, is it? It's not a reason to read on.
No.
And even with the advert diagnostic tool, which you've tried and a few people have tried, and feedback's been really good. It's similar sort of problem. So it says a nice sentence about the context of the vacancy, and I think on its own it stands out, because not many adverts do that. But once every advert does it, it doesn't really help. And actually, every vacancy has its own unique story, and that's what you should be leading with. And if you can do it in a way that shows why it matters, then great. But I think the problem with this is it looks nice, but it doesn't really mean anything. What do you do as a copywriter? Well, I write words that move people and drive action. That's what copywriting is, as opposed to LinkedIn, which thinks it's content writing. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of copywriters do think they are actually content writers, because they're writing for engagement rather than to influence decisions. But yeah, again, this is kind of true. And all this is wonderful, except that it doesn't give you any reason to get in touch with that employer. And of course it wouldn't, because it knows nothing about the vacancy. All it's done is it's guessed what a copywriter might be and written some nice words.
ChatGPT lacks the ability to push back, doesn't it? Lacks the ability to go, well, actually, I need a bit more information from you first, which you'd like to think, most recruiters are doing.
And yeah, the right way to do it is Mitch's AI product. I tried that out when it first came out, and he asked for my feedback, and I said I gave it a 7 out of 10 because the advert wasn't great that it put out, but I had quite a nasty bug at the time. My brain power was 0, and what it did was it gave me a framework to rewrite it so that it was more in line with what I wanted. Whereas if you did it on ChatGPT, I'd have to completely rewrite that. I mean, I suppose I could use it, but it doesn't really say anything. So what we could also do is, and I mentioned this earlier, is have a look at some job adverts in the wild with a website I'm a big fan of. And it'd be good to get your take on it. I know quite a lot about them, and I know a lot also about the companies that are advertising on there. So it gives me a slightly different context. So this is the Cambridge Network, which is an amazing resource for companies and individuals in Cambridge. It's a website I recommend to anyone who's looking for work in and around Cambridge, because what it does is it connects technology companies and startups and scale-ups to share ideas, to share marketing, to share events, and also as a recruitment gateway as well. And I've known Cambridge Network for 26 years because early in my career I worked for my dad's company, which was a search and selection firm called T&G Associates, and we introduced Cambridge Network's first CEO, Peter Hukin, when they were really foundational, and it's been really great to see them develop over the years. But from a personal perspective, it's also a great source of information because it's good to see who's recruiting locally. So I always keep an eye on it. And I think, regrettably, it's an example of how job boards advertise, and also how very successful and market-leading, progressive, dynamic companies, genuinely so, advertise for their own vacancies. So here's just the current adverts that they've got at the moment. So have you heard of Arm as a company?
Yeah, I know them.
So they, I think, were formed in about 1988, and originally they were called Acorn Risk Machines. I don't think many people know that, because I think they were all in.
I don't know that much about them.
Well, I know a little bit. So in 1996, in my gap year, I think it might be 97 actually, I did some work for my dad with his search firm, and we had a lady called Jane who did some resourcing for us, and she'd come in her hubby's Ferrari, and so it was a bit of a disconnect. She was quite well paid for her resourcing because it was a decent company, but not that well paid. I mean, it would make a great LinkedIn post, of course, if she was doing a selfie in her Ferrari as she was arriving at work. But her hubby was an Arm millionaire. So he was one of the founding employees, all of whom became very rich when they floated. And I read an article quite recently, which was published in 2000, where Arm at the time had on paper something like 520 stock millionaires, and it's only grown over the last 20 years. It's an incredible success story. And when you talk about startups and scale-ups in Cambridge, Arm is one of the companies that you talk about because of how successful they've been, from developing chips that you find everywhere. So, I mean, I've got a Samsung phone, but if you've got an iPhone, you've probably got an ARM chip within it. And I think more recently, they've started looking into manufacturing their own chips as well, which, given the state of AI and how they're sucking up graphics cards and that kind of thing, with NVIDIA becoming incredibly successful, I mean, surely that's a great opportunity for them as well. So it's a business with an incredible legacy, and that has been a brilliant platform for many people's careers. And this is how their adverts start on the Cambridge Network, which it says what they do, but who cares? Would be my slightly cynical reaction to that.
Yeah, I think the big thing is always the what's in it for me is what we should be like. It's a piece of marketing, right? So we should always be considering what's in it for me for the reader, and nobody's reading that and going, well, that's great news for me that this is what they do.
I think what you might do is you might see Arm and go, ooh, I've been waiting for something like this, and then you click through. But then ironically, you're clicking through and reading despite the advert rather than because of it. And I think that's actually a massive problem in industry, because any company that is starting up or scaling up will inevitably look at the jewels in the crowns of their business and go, we want to be like them. So let's have a look at their adverts. How can we emulate that and attract the same caliber of people? That's quite a natural thought process. But you're copying people who've written adverts that do the job because of who they are and because of their brand, not because of the words that they use.
They're recruiting despite their adverts, not because of their adverts.
And they can pick and choose because they pay well, they've got great packages, they're a great place to work, they've got an pedigree.
Realistically, very few people are looking at this and reading this whole advert. I mean, I've got it open on my screen. I've just scrolled down, and it's incredibly long. And realistically, people are looking at that. They're seeing the job title. I want to say they're seeing a salary, but they're not actually. There isn't a salary. They're going to have to assume a salary, and they're seeing the business and the location, and that's generally going to be enough for people. And the fact that you've got a brand name like Arm, it means that they get away with it a little bit. But actually, for roles like this that are quite difficult to recruit for, you'd think they'd still put some thought into these adverts.
This should be the most important line in any advert, be in return, rather than leading with what's important. But again, I'm sure they've got a brilliant page on Life at Arm about the different qualities of working there, but it's forcing you to click, and it's requiring you to click all the way down there. So if you haven't heard of Arm and you're a senior DevOps, well, assuming you haven't heard of Arm and you're a senior DevOps engineer, why would you read all the way through that? It talks a lot about them and their goals and so on and so forth, and maybe technically that would be of interest if you're already interested in Arm, but I wouldn't think that someone who's passive would ever look at that. And again, that sort of propagates the consideration that the best people are not applying for jobs. Rather, they're not reading them fully and they're not taking a step further. And the only way to apply on here is the Apply Now button. And I think you have to create an account and so on and so forth. So if you're on the fence and that's your only option, what does that leave you with?
Yeah, I don't mind the Apply Now being the only option on a job like this, where they're probably expecting some sort of volume and they don't want to deal with lots of people, lots of conversations. They just haven't got the resource for it. There is actually a salary range when you click Apply Now, which is nice. It's weird that's not pulled through to the Cambridge network bit.
I mean, I think it's back to intention again, isn't it? So if you want to create a little bit of friction, Apply Now and requiring someone to fill out a form will mean that you've only got invested people. But I think you have to buy that investment, unless it's a company like Arm, in which case they might be frothing at the mouth to apply now as quickly as possible. In which case, just put the job title competitive and apply now, and don't worry about the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. A location and a job title should be enough.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I did these posts using my diagnostic tool, so I would do a first line of an advert, and I used a lot of Cambridge network adverts. I'd use that as a first line, for example. Then I'd use my advert diagnostic, and then I just asked what people wanted. And job seekers overwhelmingly would say, I just want the non-negotiable details up front. So, what's going to prevent me from applying experience-wise, what the salary is, what the working arrangements are, and where it's based. So I think for a normal job advert, I disagree with that. I'd have that narrative that starts with why you'd want to work there. But for a recent role that was a fixed-term contract, I led with those details because it would only be relevant for job seekers. Like, few people are going to leave a permanent job for a fixed-term contract. And why would you? And actually, the feedback on that was really good. So listening to the audience was quite helpful in that respect. But I don't think many people listen to their audience very much.
Well, I don't think it's not that they don't listen.
Since one viewer, I'm going to read it out. I don't know if you know Mitch, Jake, but he's well worth connecting with. We've got a survivors club, Mitch and I, and others, for people who went viral a few years ago, dealing with the outcome of that and the amount of time it takes to deal with those posts. So Mitch says, hello, just wanted to say I'm really enjoying this, but won't be able to stay until the end because I'm bored. No, so I'm running training, he says. Thanks for dropping by, Mitch. If you've got any questions about recruitment words, or if you want us to look at one of your job adverts before you go, do drop it in the comments. That'd be really interesting. So, should we have a look at another one of these adverts?
I'm almost scared to, but let's do it.
We'll get one of ours up later, and we can riff into that as well. So, ECM, they're a well-known tech recruitment consultancy. we could click into one of theirs quickly. So that's quite a classic way of an agency talking about a vacancy, isn't it? Sort of third party of a company, but quite neutral. So they haven't done the market leading stuff, which actually you might think, oh, they're not trying hard. But if a sentence loses no meaning or no excitement from taking words out,
unless you're going to justify it, don't use it. You know, calling them market leading without explaining why just doesn't add anything, because we're almost blind to it. We just ignore those words now.
I mean, unfortunately, they've contradicted me with the next one because they've gone to a successful firm, and then within the second sentence, they've repeated the job title again, which isn't really problematic. It's what most people do. But I think if you're aware that this is what might encourage people to click through, it's kind of a lost opportunity. Let's have a look at one of their adverts. I mean, they're more successful than I am, I've no doubt, so you can't criticise people too much. So, I mean, that's not bad.
This is potentially a different recruiter to the other one, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about an agency, they could have any number of staff working, and you can see the quality changes from advert to advert quite often. So I think you could get rid of that first sentence because it doesn't really say anything. I mean, that's not bad. I mean, it gives a little bit of flavour about the company. But my immediate question would be, well, what's a long-term career opportunity? And
why is it a long-term opportunity?
Say that?
I like the it will suit a candidate with these qualities, as though it just seems like a sentence that adds nothing.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a short-term job hopping, don't bother, is what they're saying. Maybe that is what they're saying. Actually, the company's guilty of too many short-term staff. But if that's the case, then you'd have to look at why that's happening. So actually, although it's not a harmful sentence at first glance, it could be, if you're inferring from it, or why are they writing like this? A respectful workplace. That's quite an interesting phrase, where everyone's contributions are important. So they're not swearing and beating people up, which is real positive. So it seems to me they like that company. Could they add more? I think they probably could. They could give examples of why it's a good place to work and why that long-term career opportunity matters for this role.
I like the last sentence saying they offer a respectful workplace where everyone's contributions are important, because I think you're actually justifying what you're saying there. They've called it respectful place, and then they've said why it's respectful. You know, I think that's the key to a lot of this stuff, is if you're going to say it, justify it, make it have meaning. You know, this is why we hate the this is a dynamic market leading company sort of openers, because there's no, what does that mean?
Why are they dynamic? They're about to go bust, and so everyone's flapping around in desperation, or it could be they're creating new ideas all the time, and that's what we mean by lack of meaning. So long-term career opportunity for me, I mean, that could mean different things to different people, and that's the problem. So for me, if I was looking for a long-term career opportunity, I'd look for, like it says there, someone where contributions are important, maybe some training, budget for training, or a mentor within the business. Or maybe they're growing, so they promote 10% of their workforce every year, which is something one of my favourite clients is doing for their people. So why wouldn't you shout out about that? So I think actually this is an above average advert, and it's a bit more accessible than some, because rather than saying, if you don't hear from us in 2 weeks,
contact us even if it's not quite right.
It's more about starting a conversation, which is great. And this might seem like a non-helpful statement, but actually, if you talk to a lot of job seekers at the moment, there's a lot of that going on. CVs about companies being talked about. That's an interesting phrase. I don't see that very often on job adverts. But no. I think
it's not legally binding, is it? So I mean,
I think that's probably a reaction to the amount of slightly fibby CVs that we're doing around at the moment. Maybe
the sign tells a story.
Yeah, but I think you can do it in a different way. So, but I think that advert's more intentional than a lot of, because they've thought about parts of it. So TTP, have you heard of TTP?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
So again,
CTP.
I mean, when I used to work for my dad's company, we used to get a once a week mailer from Pauline Cheeseman, who was the HR officer of TTP, with all their vacancies, and then you'd be invited to send CVs across, which that wouldn't happen these days, I don't think. But I mean, they're a technology consultancy that have spun out a lot of amazing technologies, some of which have become nearly as widespread as ARMS technology. So, for example, my memory might be going a bit wrong here. I think one of their spin-outs was TTP-Com, and TTP-Com were then evolved into Cambridge Silicon Radio, who developed a dual-chip Bluetooth solution that was cheaper and more effective than what was out there. And now that's in billions of handsets worldwide. But if you thread that back, potentially that's research that span out of TTP years ago. I say potentially because my memory is a bit vague there. But they've developed a lot of companies like that, and they're very well known in the tech space within their niche. But I spoke to a job seeker who was a talent acquisition guy. I think he's moved away from talent acquisition, like a lot of people seem to be doing at the moment, which is quite sad. And he said, I went to this company called TTP, and the first thing that stuck out was they had this weird blocky little logo. It looked like a Lego logo, and they spoke very highly of themselves, but I didn't really know I wanted to work there. That to me was really damning about the business, because I think they didn't look outside of their domain. I think if they went that extra step and spent their incredible intellectual clout on thinking about, well, what about the people who don't know about us, they'd probably make their lives a lot easier. So, and again, a bit like ARM, that doesn't really say anything about who they are, other than what anyone else might say. Employee owned, that's quite unusual. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's interesting as well. And again, that could be expanded upon to
exactly. Yeah, why did they go employee owned? I mean, typically there's a culture that goes with employee owned, which is a good thing, and you get tax benefits and so on and so forth. But unless you know what an employee owned thing is, that's not necessarily a benefit. So again, it's an element they could expand on really straightforwardly that would make a difference. So mechanical design engineer. So this is the kind of vacancy that would be on Pauline's round robin 28 years ago. So it's very much about them, about what they need. It does say you, which is sadly unusual. It does have quite a nice big benefits statement, although it doesn't really say the juicy bits like how much money you earn and 10% of salary. Well, if you don't know what your salary is, it's quite hard to make, but that pension is quite good.
10% of nothing is still nothing.
Yeah, exactly. If they do have a nice on-site restaurant, actually. Oh, it's a nice benefits package, but I think it's a missed opportunity again.
Yeah, you have to go so far before you find it.
Collaborative entrepreneurial environment. It's one of those cliches, isn't it? Entrepreneurial.
We're looking for creative.
Because entrepreneurs are disruptive. But I think they're probably what they mean by that is someone who can vocalize their ideas in an appropriate way. Maybe I'm wrong. All right. Let's do one more of these, and I think we've probably had enough. So, Redgate, again, another amazing business that if you didn't know who they were, you'd be clicking through despite it. Anglia Ruskin, Global University. I want to find a really good advert. Domino. Domino's again another amazing company. So they invented the technology that does that printed dates on eggs. So it's not something you'd ever be aware of, but isn't that cool? They're not Domino's Pizza. I think they should riff on that.
Yeah, it is making me hungry just thinking about it. I'm just thinking about my lunch now.
And interestingly, they don't make their money through manufacturing, coding, marking, and printing technologies. A bit like when you buy an Epson or an HP, and it's quite cheap, 30 quid. You think, isn't that a bargain? Then you buy the inkjet cartridges, and they're £190. That's where they make their money. So it's interesting that they don't mention the thing that actually drives their revenue. Yeah. And perhaps you don't want to do that because maybe customers will see that, and you don't want that to happen. But again, they're a very successful business, hundreds of millions of pounds. What does their advert say? Well, it says that they're looking for a digital product specialist to join their software team.
I mean, there's so much irrelevance in that first.
Yeah.
sentence, isn't there? We're seeking, yes, because it's a job advert, to join our software team. Okay, great. That would likely be obvious. Reporting to the digital printing software manager. Right, okay. My manager is going to be the manager of this role. Just straight away, it's just
Well, at least you
irrelevant.
know you've got a manager.
Well, yeah, I'd like to think that's a given in most roles.
So as a talented individual, you can compare. Well, this is going to change soon, isn't it? Competitive salary.
Yeah, I look forward to that change. I think that's very important.
So Malcolm, who is a valued guest on the LinkedIn Lives that I do with Simon Ward, has come along today. Thank you, Malcolm. I'll just read through his couple of comments. I've noticed a lot of job descriptions for roles I'm interested in, like templates that have been copy pasted. This could lead towards phony jobs. Good point. I love the employee benefits sections. They're a bit vacuous. Sometimes when you ask the HR function about something after being in a job 6 months, you find out you don't qualify for half of what they promised until you've been employed for 1 year minimum. Again, that's really true. Although I think in an advert you can kind of forgive that because you don't want to present that kind of objection, maybe. But yeah, both of those are absolutely right. And I think the whole scam thing is something for companies to be aware of, because actually, if they were more transparent and more focused on showing the truth of their vacancy, that would stand out from scams very straightforwardly. But scam jobs can go onto ChatGPT and ask for a copywriter job spec or advert, and it'll look better than what Domino have written, as we've just shown. I think the problem for a lot of companies, especially bigger companies, is that they're ATS adverts. So you're restricted by the system to an extent. So ATS being applicant tracking system, if it generates the adverts. And even if it doesn't, for bigger companies, they've got a house style which they have to stick to. So when I've been doing the offering up my free job advert diagnostic to various people I'm connected with, some people would try it and give great feedback and say, well, unfortunately, we can't do anything about that because we have to write in that format. So it's like the common form of writing adverts has trained companies that that's the acceptable way of doing things. Then it's been baked into their system, and therefore that's what gets put out. Scammers can copy it. People who aren't those huge organisations look at that and think, well, this is what we need to be doing. And so that's what they put out of job adverts. And it's absolutely ludicrous. So I came across let's take this off for a bit and show our ugly mugs. Sorry, you're a good looking chap.
The difficulty with that stuff, Greg, is like there's the problem's just further up the chain, and it never gets dealt with. So if it's the ATS that's causing problems, then it just means the setup somewhere is wrong, or it's too locked down, or it's not been.
Or the decision on what ATS to use, they're prioritising their candidates.
Workday, yeah.
And Workday is a really good case in point, because Workday is actually part of an amazing suite of software for HR and finance, within which is an ATS bolt-on. So you get the ATS because of the other things it does for the business. But I don't think about the candidates.
And the other issue, if not the ATS, is if this is the way we have to write ads, so it just means someone further up the chain doesn't understand what marketing is in job advertising. So it just the problem's always there somewhere. There's always a problem to be fixed somewhere. It's just the wrong people.
Malcolm has thanked me for the compliment, but I have to say, when you make up 50% of the audience, you're going to get a lot of attention. So
yeah.
So a few years ago, I think the real step change for me in how I looked at my adverts was I came across a marketing piece on inside out versus outside in marketing. Are you familiar with that as a term?
Yeah.
So inside out means that you start from the product of a company and you push your message out and you help that people will see it and see you for what you are and will buy it for that reason. So Apple are brilliant at inside out marketing. And of course, it's such an ecosystem that you're looking for the next Apple product. So when you look at that, you think, well, that's great marketing. You'd automatically go, this is Greg. He is 48 years old and he has this vacancy. Won't you please have a look at it? Which, when you put it like that, is a bit daft. I mean, you wouldn't go on you'd hope you wouldn't go on a date talking about yourself like that. Oh, Nikki's here. Nikki's your friend, I think, and my friend too, but you've met her in person.
Yeah, I'm here too.
So that means we can give less compliments to Malcolm, because now he's only 33% of the viewership. So
yeah,
assuming Mitch is still here, maybe we've got someone else, I don't know. So inside out, it starts with you, and you talk about yourself, and if you're on a date, that probably both upsets the other person and they friend zone you straight away. The other way is outside in. So you start with the other person and you think about, well, what do we need to do to create a message that will appeal to this person to come to us? And logically, it makes sense within a job advert or in recruitment in general, because when you look at a vacancy, the first thing you should do is think, well, what does good look like? What's going to make up this individual? What kind of experience or different profiles of experience could lead to a successful hire? And then the next step should be, well, what's going to motivate them to start a conversation with us or be interested in this? I mean, I think unfortunately most people think, if you're lucky, would think, well, why do they want to work here? But they're not immediately in a position where they even want to necessarily think about changing jobs, especially if it's a passive candidate. So the priority has to be, well, how can we interest someone to read on from that preview section on the Cambridge network to read the job proper, to encourage them to think about, well, maybe I could have a call or drop an email. My CV's not up to date. I don't have time to do that for a couple of weeks. So how can you encourage that person to engage in the process? Now, when you're doing headhunting, typically when you contact someone, you don't expect their CV to be up to date. What you're hoping to do is start a conversation. And that should be the priority for me in adverts, is really thinking about not what our needs are, but what are the needs of that person that we hope to start a conversation with. And that's where all the adverts that we've had a look at in the last 20 minutes or so fail. They don't do that at all. They talk about them and their needs, and they hope that the reader will take the next step.
I think it's easy for businesses to fall into that trap now, though. I think AI has made it easier because we're in this place now where we've got these AI application programs where you can press a few buttons and your CV is sent out to 1,000 different businesses. 999 of them probably irrelevant and not actual worthwhile applications. So businesses are actually seeing a rise in the amount of applications that they're having. And although they're not getting an increase in relevant applications, they're looking at all these applications and going, well, look, clearly we're doing something right because we get loads of applications. So in their minds, they're sort of seeing this increase and going, well, we're doing the right thing here. We don't necessarily need to change. And actually what they want to do is they want to reduce the amount of applications. So instead of going, well, let's find the things that the right people are interested in. Let's start introducing barriers, and that's when you get don't apply if you don't have this, and you get these massive long lists of requirements. So it's just, I can see how they've come to that solution, but it's just not.
It's reacting rather than being deliberate.
And I think it's a reaction to the wrong problem.
Part of the problem is job boards as well, and the advice that they give. I mean, I've got good relationships with the job boards I use, and I really value what they do for me. But their advice is generally snot, as I think I've put in the intro post to this, because, and I think there's a cynical reason for it, which is about renewals in job boards. So I spoke to a couple of account managers. Oh, my dog's gone mental. She's probably upset about job advertising, I imagine.
She's got something to say.
So I spoke to a couple of my account managers, and they said, well, whenever we ask our clients, recruitment agencies and employers, how are your adverts going for you, they always lie because they're worried that we'll put our prices up if they say it's too effective. I mean, all my job adverts are terrible, obviously, on job boards, but none of them work because I want my renewal prices to keep down. But because they can't prove how effective the job adverts are, all they can do is show the provable metrics, which is number of applications, number of CVs on the CV databases. So it becomes to their advantage to increase the number of applications, whereas an effective job advert should reduce the number of applications, because one of the things you should do is give people agency not to apply by showing salary. If you can't afford them, why would you interview them? By showing the non-negotiables, being really clear about it. People who read adverts, which is the people that you write adverts for, should be able to make an informed decision. Now, what confuses that is the amount of AI optimized CVs and easy applies, and there's lazy apply, the automation software, which enables people to scale their applications. But I think you have to set them in a separate category, because if they're not reading your advert's not for them. It doesn't mean they're necessarily an unsuitable candidate, but they're certainly a lower stake candidate.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
Now, are we feeling brave? Should we show one of our adverts?
I don't think I've got anything live at the minute.
No, I've taken down a couple of mine recently.
I might have something of mine.
Well, I'll show one I've just taken down, because I think it'll still be on my dashboard. So if I just get that up. If I can, problem with these LinkedIn Lives is I forget how to use computers during them, which is a bit embarrassing. Right, so if I go into this, you talk for a minute about something, Jake, and I'll just find my most recent advert, and I'll explain why I did it. It was
Sure.
one of my quicker adverts to write because it was required a bit less creativity.
I do have another comment I'll just read out from
Okay.
who says, if the recruiters and parent companies are difficult to contact, especially through LinkedIn, unless you have premium, it's rather like shooting a torpedo from a submarine when you're submerged. One of my old friends said that social media isn't always real. How can you tell if a recruiter on LinkedIn is real, especially as LinkedIn is very circumspect in their profiling? Yeah, absolutely. It's so difficult out there if you're an average job seeker looking to apply to jobs. It is very, very difficult to get any traction without some sort of networking or knowing somebody or having somebody in the right place or some introduction. It feels like a terrible experience right now if you're an applicant.
And it's tough because I always recommend to put your contact number and your email address in. But I have noticed, and on the job I'll show that. So I was able to recruit on the Thursday, then I had to go to cricket on the Friday, so I didn't really want to be contacted. And on the Thursday, I had something like 5 phone calls and 6 7 emails, which doesn't sound like a massive amount, but is actually significantly the most I've ever had for a job advert. So I had to take that off my advert actually. But let me show you the one that I've recently taken down. I won't say anything about the process, I'll just show the advert. And I'll explain why I did it. So this was for a fixed term contract. So if you remember earlier, I mentioned about the post where I had quite a lot of feedback from job seekers about what they want. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to put the key points in there straight away. I thought I'd put a little bit of a slightly different line in there because it is an opportunity to make a bit of an impact, which I'll explain later. And then I thought I'd just be really candid about, what the context is, a bit about the business as well, because, I know Mitch particularly doesn't like talking about companies, but it's always one of the first questions that people have is, who are they and what they do. So I think I've always put a small amount.
It needs to be in there somewhere. You need to understand what side of business you're applying for. Just not, it's just not the first thing.
Practicality about the contract. I mean, I don't. When I first wrote this advert, I actually only had one bullet point, but then I thought, well, you know what, I might as well put the extra stuff in it because I kind of thought people who do this role will know what those responsibilities are. But actually, because there's a bit of variation in jobs, I thought it'd be just helpful to be specific about it. Now, I only ever try and do 3 bullet points on the experience requirement. And the phrase I use is minimum viable, which is from product management, which is that if you try and reduce the amount of requirements, the absolute core, non-negotiable points, then anyone who meets those points is a viable candidate. Now, the problem with this vacancy is within 4 days, I'd had something like 54 viable candidates apply. So I had to remove it on the Monday just because there were too many people to get through. But for me, this is about effectiveness, accessibility, and inclusion. Because what you see with a lot of job adverts is, don't worry if you don't meet all the requirements. If you think you're a strong candidate, please send your CV through anyway. Evidence shows that women are less likely to apply for a job if they only meet 70% of the requirements or something like that. But whereas I think that's kind of encouraging people to cross the bridge, whereas for me, it's about building the bridge to them. We should be doing the work. It's our vacancy. It's our opportunity to find someone amazing for it. So why wouldn't we do the work to help people make an informed decision? The other thing I do is a bit of transparency on the process. I've started using this as a boilerplate now, which to me,
sad that you have to, but yeah, I like it.
But it speaks to people's assumptions. I know a lot of people are assuming that AI are making decisions, which isn't true. But when you know that's a default.
Do you know what? I've been saying it isn't true for the last 4 years at least, and it is starting to become true though. Like
it's more true
where it's starting to happen. It's still not common, I don't think, but it's.
I would say that. I mean, but AI doesn't make decisions, and in fact, it's increasingly illegal to do that with laws that are coming in. But with volume and filtering, you're less likely to be reviewed as a candidate if you don't show the applicability of your application, how strong you are as a candidate. And even then, just with the amount of volume out there, it's really hard for humans to read through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications. I mean, this advert had something like across this and CV library, which the only tool I used for this one, something like 250 applications in 4 days. And I wasn't available for a couple of those days. And those 4 days included the weekends. So I took it down. And even then, just with the dashboard that LinkedIn has. So LinkedIn kind of offers I'll take this off now, kind of offers a threadbare ATS applicant tracking system so that you can manage the application. So you can deem people suitable, unsuitable, you can send communications through. And it's not great, but especially for a smaller company that doesn't have that, it's not a bad system. But that was already quite a high number for me to try and go through fairly and read properly, especially when I know that people don't necessarily know how to write CVs.
When you say you had 250-ish applications and 50 something of them were viable, of those 190 to 200 that were not viable, how not viable were they? Are we talking missing a couple of things, or are we talking complete?
This is a maternity contract. If you don't have core fit applications, you have to compromise. I mean, I don't just advertise. I'll source and I'll network for this kind of job as well. And the nice thing about sourcing is it's more controllable, so you can be more specific in what you're looking for. So when we say sourcing, for people who aren't in the know, that's using things like LinkedIn Recruiter or CV databases to find potential candidates. So for this kind of role, actually, I might have chosen not to advertise and only source because there's enough people out there to fill it adequately. But I strongly believe that you should advertise when you can for many reasons, one of which is proof of process. I could show that employer what I've been doing with the adverts. It's not a bad advert. I think it represents them well. Of that, let's say we didn't have the 54 viable candidates. I reckon there'd probably be another 50 or so that could probably do the job, but would need a bit of qualification. And then beyond that, so the actual number of totally unqualified candidates was quite low. I think it was only about 20 or 30, which really surprised me. So a really strong application base. And I think it's an indictment of the state of that industry rather than anything. Because I think, unfortunately, accounts payable is a function that's getting automated quite heavily because it's understandably so. It's the nature.
Even in your advert, you're suggesting automating some of the
yeah. So where this wasn't a usual vacancy was the opportunity to implement some automation for a scaling business.
I have to say that would. I mean, okay, maybe if they're scaling business, that changes things slightly, but that would worry me as the outgoing person, the person going on mat leave.
Absolutely. And so one of the priorities which talk about in the advert was coaching, mentoring them into the new role when they come back, if they choose to come back. So that's where it's a bit of an unusual role. And that's actually what landed with some candidates. But the company's rationale for this role was that as they scale, they want these processes in place to enable them to do the same with the same amount of people, the work that supports the bigger business, and automation is a natural opportunity for them. But without automation, they'd be hiring an extra person. So even though that job's safe, it's not growing the economy in the way it might have done before. So when you look at any sort of function, you expect roles to be normally filled through growth, through replacement, backfill, that kind of thing. But when companies don't need to recruit because there's automation, that's where it creates what could be an existential problem for this kind of role, because there are fewer vacancies out there. And that's why I've had such a high volume of applications. It's quite sad, really. And actually, for me, it's kind of created more of a burden in recruitment, because I know a lot of these people have very real stakes, and some of them have got financial crunches coming up. So trying to deal with them with a bit of courtesy is really important. And that's actually why, again, going back to that advert, I try and give transparency over what the role is, just to help people make better decisions, or at least know what they can expect.
There are a lot of industries like that at the minute, which is sad. I was recruiting for some creative roles at the end of last year, where the application figures, you leave it for a couple of days and you're on 400 applications. And going through some of these, there was some video editors I was doing recruit for, going through these video editor CVs, 90% of them are really, really talented, smart individuals. So there's certain industries that I just feel like they're like that at the moment.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of in a transformational time, aren't we? I think you have to look very carefully about what your career is going to be like in future. So I've kind of taken the stand to be choose it as more human in recruitment and provide more sort of craftsman type approach rather than scaling it with automation, because I think that's potentially where things could stand out in future as companies lean into automation and it doesn't work for certain roles. So that's what I can fix. But I think, again, it's about intention. You've got to just be really intentional about what you want to do in your career, whatever your career is.
Yeah, 100%.
Anything you want to cover? We've got 5 more minutes.
Not at the moment. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground today.
It's gone better.
We haven't through the ground, but we have covered it.
Yeah, no, we haven't had any challenging questions, which is a bit of a shame. But maybe someone's thinking, "What on earth are you two going on about? This is how recruitment works, and it works really well." Well, I don't think so.
If Nikki's heard the comment about challenging questions, she'll be sitting there thinking of the most difficult thing she can come up with right now.
Well, if any of our 3 or 4 viewers, which is it's getting up there, has a question, you've got about 4 minutes to put it through, or maybe you've seen Malcolm, maybe you've seen a job advert that you're curious about and you'd like us to have a quick scuzzy at it to give you our views. Well, I'm glad I'm running out of time, Jake. I've forgotten how to speak. Well, we'll give him another 20 seconds or so.
Yeah, fair enough.
So there were a couple of other topics that we were kind of thinking about talking about, such as how AI is being used in recruitment marketing. Someone's commented, "They're desperate for a wee over here." Oh no, sorry, that's a private message from Jake. Sorry. Oh no, that's embarrassing.
That was my subtle way of telling you I'm ready.
Well, I already sent you a topic, Jake. Well, have you got anything from Nikki?
Oh, Nikki did ask us to talk about. It didn't really come up in naturally. She'd asked to talk about those discriminatory things that come up. So one of the things that we still see a lot of is as full-on discriminatory comments in job adverts, like needing 10 years experience and the like.
Well, this is again, I think, symptomatic of systemized recruitment and ATS as well. So if you look at like the process, how a lot of companies put their adverts together, I don't think it's necessarily intentional. I think it's, we need this technology, and then HR will say, okay, what guarantees capability, or probably 10 years experience, right? If you need someone really senior, but they haven't checked that, ChatGPT was only released in November 2022. So I think that kind of stuff tends to happen automatically rather than intentionally. Although you do see a lot of unintentional language, which does show shitty organisations and those red flags. Are you able to hit the ground running? Yeah. Are you resilient?
We're like a family here.
Except, well, yeah.
You can never leave.
I gave some advice to someone recently where she was thinking about changing their career, and I said, well, actually, what she should probably do is secure a role in her core career, and then if a job comes up in the area she really wants to go into, cross that bridge when she comes to it. And she said, well, I'm not really sure about that because I'm a person of high integrity, so I wouldn't want to go into something I'm not 100% wholehearted on. So I said, well, I'm a person of high integrity too, except when you go into a company and they change their mind because of a change in an Excel spreadsheet, it doesn't matter how much of a family they are, but you're still going to be out on your ear straight away. All you can do is make decisions with the best information that's in front of you. And with a job advert, it's those intentional and unintentional words. But we're a family here. Ugh. I don't know, Christmas lunch at the Wyatts is always a bit of a fraught affair.
Exactly.
Right. Well, I think if we're going to do another session like this, let's do it on Nikki's topic, because that's a really big one to dive into, because it's a microcosm of recruitment at large, much like job adverts is.
We do have a quick question from Malcolm that's come through as well. So he says, is there some point in the future where vacancy posting might become obsolete and recruiters could sift through many profiles on many platforms and reach out directly to potential candidates? AI might develop enough for this.
Well, that's already happened. I think you can fill any vacancy through sourcing, so using LinkedIn Recruiter License or job board CV databases. And I think increasingly so, as job advert numbers increase with automated applications that many of which are telling fibs, do you really want to put yourself through the time of trying to go through all those or perhaps it's better just to do the confidential sourcing where you've got full control over it. I think, unfortunately, that is the case, and that's something we've talked about on Simon's LinkedIn Lives, whereby you have to tap into that as a job seeker. You have to be discoverable on LinkedIn and CV databases. So yeah, it's an important question, but it's already happening.
Yeah.
All right, I think on that note, I had a private message earlier that I won't share, that someone needs to go. So I think we'll call it a close for today. But if you're up for it, Jake, it'd be great to do another one of these so we can chat later. And perhaps we can look at the discriminatory angle, or maybe we can have a look at AI and how that's affecting job applications in a bit more detail.
Cool, lovely. Good chatting to you. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, everyone, for dropping by, and we'll see you again at some point.
Thank you.